How hard could it be? Those were the last words I said before I descended into one of the most traumatic experiences of my entire life. Putting up the backsplash in my kitchen. Because how hard could it be, really? Well, it almost killed me. That's how hard it could be, because apparently putting up rectangles on a wall is a battle to the death. And I already see some of your faces right now. I see your faces. You're saying, Brian, I've put up a backsplash. It's really not that bad. Well, where were you when I put up mine then? Where were you? Because Nicole and I, we fought through this. We survived to tell the tale, but it wasn't without scars. And every time I look at that backsplash in that kitchen, I remember those cold, dark days of July 2022 and how I almost died. How hard could it be? Anybody who's ever gotten a puppy has had to eat those words. Because they're cute at the shelter of the breeder, aren't they? And then they turn your remote into a Slim Jim. How hard could it be? I think anybody who's taken out a student loan has said that too when they're 18 years old. And 20 years later, you realize actually pretty hard sometimes to pay those school loans off. Marriage, how hard could it be? You're married to your soulmate. This is who you're supposed to be with. Well, boy, you factor in the smells and the snoring and the fact that you are incompatible on 372 different levels. Very hard, actually. Very, very hard. Christianity, following Jesus. How hard could it be? Now, today, guys, we have reached the culmination. It is the final chapter. This is the finish line. We're coming to the end of our Fresh Fire series, guys. What a ride this series has been. I think this has been a great way to launch the year because we've been talking all things fire. Fire being your spiritual passion, your spiritual temperature. And guys, come on. What a month plus it's been. I mean, we kicked this thing off January 4th. We did a whole week of prayer and fasting. So many of you guys engaged in that. That was just an incredible week. In the middle of that week, we had our night of prayer and worship. We packed this place out with people seeking God together. And I know we just celebrated a minute ago, but just last Sunday, guys, come on. 89 people took a step and got baptized in this church going public in their faith. I think that's worth one more clap right now. That's worth another clap. And just as a side benefit for me, I've been able to play with real fire for at least half of the sermons I've preached in this series, and I might do it again today. We'll see. But guys, the entire series, man, I am praying and hoping that you make this a verse you memorize, that you do not forget this, that this becomes a rally cry for your life, because this entire series comes from one single verse. Paul says, never be lacking in zeal. That's your conviction. But keep your spiritual fervor. Again, that means boiling point. Serving the Lord. This is what every single one of us here is called to stoke this fire in your soul. This fire that never stops burning, that keeps burning brighter and stronger every day. We want to be a people who have fresh fire in our lives. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, I could have ended the series last week. I could have. And I don't think anybody would have been disappointed. You know, we've talked about a lot of things, fire, had some good stuff. But we need this week. We need this one. I think today's topic is essential for us to have a total and complete understanding of this whole concept of fire, because this is what I know is going to happen when we close the series today. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to go, yay, fire. I'm going to keep my passion. And some of you guys I've even talked to, you've started a Bible reading plan in this last month. You've kind of got kick-started your prayer life a little bit. And you're like, yeah, I'm kind of getting some of this heat back. I'm kind of excited. And then some days are going to go by. Some weeks are going to pass. Some months are going to come and go. And maybe it's this year. Maybe it's somewhere in the near future. But these things are going to happen. Out of nowhere, for some of us in here, you are going to find yourself without a job. Others of us, it's going to come right out of left field. You are going to get news that you never expected. In other places, you're not even going to know where it's coming from, but that person that you care so much about is going to tell you that they don't want to be in your life anymore. Some are going to get letters in the mail that say, thank you so much for your interest, but we've decided to go in a different direction. And in other places, you are going to pick up that phone one day, and that voice in the other line is going to say, I hate to be the one who has to tell you this. And so, guys, if we really want to get a full understanding of what we're talking about in this series, we have to talk about the fires of life. So fire in the Bible, in so many places, is a positive symbol. So it's a symbol of God's presence, of his power, of his favor. That's everything we talked about last week. Fire is also a symbol of spiritual passion. It's your spiritual temperature. I mean, that's literally what this entire series has been about. That's Romans 12. But the Bible also uses fire in another way. And Peter was a writer in the New Testament, one of Jesus' closest followers, and he says this in one of his letters. Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you are going through, as if something strange were happening to you. So these people that Peter's writing to had fire in their life. But this is not the fire that you want. Because Peter here is speaking to the fire of hardship, suffering, pain, and even what he calls trials. And this is actually a theme we see through the entire Bible. So for example, Jesus himself, he said this, in this world you will have, now hold on, I know some of you are all the Bible nerds already speaking out ahead of me, okay, hold on, I know you got A's on all your tests, just 1 second. You will have, now right here Jesus, he doesn't say unicorns and rainbows and cotton candy and Skittles. Jesus does not say, I guarantee in this world you have a nice big house with a nice big yard with a family and the perfect number of kids you always wanted who don't have any behavioral problems or ADD or gluten intolerances in their life. No, Jesus says, in this world you have what? Trouble. Some of you guys knew it. Trouble. Jesus says, I have one guarantee I can make you about your life. It is going to stink sometimes. Even Psalms says this in Psalm 34, the afflictions of the righteous are many. Even good people do not get a get out of jail free card when it comes to this. It's going to come to every single one of us in some form. So the one thing we absolutely must accept about this idea is the fires will come. Now, I already know what some of you guys are thinking. You're thinking, Brian, this is sure panning out to be a positive, encouraging, uplifting message. This is really lifting my spirits. Don't worry, I still got some time, okay? Let me cook for a little bit here. But I have to set our expectations today. You will not get out of this life unscathed. In this world, in this life, you are guaranteed to have trouble. The fires will come. There is no avoiding it. Some of the fires in your life are going to be totally random, unexpected. You're not even going to see them coming. Some fires in your life are going to be started by other people that you love and care about. Some fires you are going to start all by yourself without any help. Some of your fires are going to be short. Some are going to be long, some are going to be big, some are going to be small. Some fires are just going to singe you a little bit. Some are going to scorch. And some fires in your life will give you third-degree burns. So how hard can it be? How hard could life possibly be? Well, pretty hard, actually. Because those fires, they are coming. And so what are you supposed to do about that? Just get in the fetal position and just hope for the best? Just go build a bunker and get a lot of ammo and just get ready? Do you just do what this guy is doing right here and just pretend everything's perfectly fine? The house is not on fire? No, we actually can do a lot better than that. And so today, I want to talk about facing the fire. Facing the fire. When it comes to fires in your life, the pain, the hardship, the unexpected emergencies, the loss, the trials, it is critical that you get properly equipped so you can handle what you are absolutely and inevitably going to face at different times and seasons in your life. And so where do we even begin to face some of the fires that come our way? We're going to cover a few things here that we see in the Bible. First thing we absolutely have to do is we have to understand how God uses fire. Understand how God uses fire. Now, there's one thing I said in week 1 of this series, okay? Here's your pop quiz. I said, fire is always, without a doubt, always, every time. You all don't remember my sermons the day after I preach them. You're definitely not going to remember January. I said, fire is always hot. It's hot. My last time to play with fire. It's hot. Now, if you keep a safe distance away from fire, not a problem at all. You don't even feel the heat. But you get close, you feel it, man. You get in that fire, you cannot avoid the heat. Now, Peter, let's go back to his letter. Again, he's talking to these people who got some fire. He says, so be truly glad. There's wonderful joy ahead, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Now, Peter, he says, you have been suffering grief. This is a term of extreme sorrow and sadness. And I think it's worth recognizing here that Peter does not make light of these people's pain. So Peter's not just saying, why don't you just get over it? Like, you just need a better attitude. You just got to figure this out. Why can't you be happy? And I think this actually should encourage us, because really what Peter's showing here is Christians, we're not just supposed to pretend everything's fine. Because sometimes it's not fine. It is not okay. And it is okay to acknowledge that. Yeah, my life stinks right now. I'm not enjoying this. This is hard. And while that's true, Peter says there's a lot of suffering right now. There's a lot of grief. But at the same point, he says, your faith, it is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Now, we hear that word test, and immediately we think like an exam. Like this is a pass-fail. I got to get the answers right because God is going to grade me. Well, this word test here is actually a word for refining metal to remove impurities. So, for example, refiners, they still even do this today. They break up this ore. It's rock and it's sediment, and they put it inside this crucible here that then goes inside a furnace that they heat up to as much as 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And what happens is that extreme heat causes the impurities to rise to the top, get filtered out, and then what comes out is pure gold. I had a conversation with a man from a church I worked at years ago, and we were just getting to know each other, our first time really hanging out. And this man was a very successful business owner. And in his industry, he was kind of at the pinnacle of success. He was at the very top tier. Well, while he was building this incredible company, 2008 came around. Now, I know for some of the younger folk in this room, you're like, I don't even remember that. This has become like an old fogey illustration. But for those of us who can remember, 2008 was a rough year for some folks. The market went down 60%. The real estate situation was a total mess. Wall Street was melting down. And as this was going on, this man, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't doing anything illegal. He was above board, but it was a hard season. So he's trying to hold things together. He's trying to take care of his staff. He's trying to get through this hard season, but it just wasn't enough. And this man ended up losing everything. He had to file for bankruptcy. He lost his house. He had to move into his kid's basement. And this guy in his mid-50s had to start all over again from zero. Now, when I got together with him, we were having coffee. It was just a couple years after this experience he went through, and I just couldn't help but ask him, I'm like, man, how are you doing now? Like, how are things? How did you even get through it? You know, where are you on the other side? And I'll never forget this conversation, because he said, Brian, I would never in a million years want to go through that again. And if I could have avoided it, I absolutely would have. But then he said something that was very strange to me. He said, but at the same time, I wouldn't change it. And he said, I can't even really explain it, Brian, but God used that experience in my life. Like, I changed because of what I had to go through with that. And he even said this, I still don't forget, he said, I actually almost feel kind of grateful for it in a strange way. And see, what this man experienced and what Peter is talking about is this key principle. God uses fire not to consume, but to cleanse. So just like you can't get pure gold without heat, you can't get pure faith without fire. And fire is one of the tools God is going to use to cleanse you. There's going to be times where he's going to allow the heat of trials to go up in your life, and that heat is going to start to surface some of the impurities in you. The things that you really are putting your hope in. The stuff that you really trust. Those things that you really want more than you even want God start to bubble up, and God's going to use that trial to help filter out all the gross stuff that's inside of you. James speaks exactly to this dynamic too in the New Testament. He says this, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing, again, refining of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Now let's see what James is saying here. This is critical. So James is saying here, the testing of your faith produces something, perseverance. But this is the key here too. He says you have to be very careful that you let perseverance finish its work. Okay, follow me here. James is basically saying something. This is going to sound cheesy, but I'm just trying to help you remember it, okay? So don't let the hokiness distract you from the point. James is basically saying fires will either burn you to a crisp or burn you clean. Now see, James said, be very careful that you do not undermine the process that God may be allowing you to go through. Because what happens is sometimes the heat of the struggles we go through is so intense, we're going to do anything to get out of it. And we end up actually undermining everything God's trying to do. And we don't end up being refined, we end up getting roasted. And you'll see this happen in people's lives. They go through a hard thing, and instead of it cleaning them, they get crispy. A bitterness starts to come in. There's resentment. There's this anger that you haven't seen in them before. They start to give up on hope. People start to give up on God. And what happens is your soul actually gets these burn scars on it. And James is saying you have to make sure that you persevere through the fires. You have to push through them because God will never waste a fire in your life. And so the attitude and the posture we really want to have when it comes to fires is the same one Job had. Again, one of the guys who probably suffered the worst in the Bible. Look what Job says. When he has tested me, I will come out as pure as gold. So this is God's hope for you when it comes to fires. God is hoping that you will be able to persevere with his help and that you will be able to experience this better, this brighter, this refined faith that is going to genuinely shine with this true purity in your life. So God is using it. You have to understand, God never wastes a fire. He's using it. But there's a second thing here. You want to be able to face fires in your life? You better make sure you understand the purpose of your life. You got to understand the purpose of your life. I was having a conversation with some friends some weeks ago, and there was a woman in this group. I don't even know how the topic came up, but she said something that kind of got my attention. She said, you know what? I really feel like life is about finding your happiness. She's like, I think that's really, at the end of the day, you need to figure out what makes you happy, and you need to do that. And she got me thinking when she said that, I was like, man, that's really interesting, because I couldn't help but think. I was like, man, I wonder what people from other times in history would have to say about that. Because I started thinking, I'm like, what if you like interviewed someone from the Dark Ages? and you said, hey, what is the purpose of life? You think one of them would be like, you know what? You need to find your happiness. No, they're going to be like, survive the next winter. Do not starve to death. That is the goal of life. Live past the age of 20. Could you imagine asking somebody that in the Civil War? Hey, what's the purpose of life? Oh, live your best life. That's what it's all about. No, they're going to say, don't get shot in the kneecap by a musket and have your legs sawed off by a raw, rusty saw. That's the goal of life. And so here's what I think I've noticed. The cultural moment you live in shapes so much how you think about the purpose and meaning of your life. So follow me here. Because of the current cultural moment we live in, if you do ask a lot of people, hey, what do you think life is about? You probably will hear some things like, be happy. Man, live your best life. You do you, man. Like, you figure out what's going to satisfy you. You live out all those goals. You make as much money as you want, you can. Here's the thing. I'm not even saying any of that is necessarily bad. But what I am wondering is that the purpose of your life? Like, make a bucket list and just go for it. Now, I'm going to get thick here for a minute, but let's get through these weeds because I think this is important. What happens so many times in people's lives is we design the purpose for our life, only to find out that the purpose we've built for our life is extremely vulnerable to fires. So, for example, for a lot of us, we really think, man, success, achievement, like that's what I'm really driving for. I am trying to get to this point in my life. And you set that as the main focus. And so what happens is if you don't live up to that standard you have for yourself, you're not just disappointed, you are a failure. And the painful irony of the other side of this one, you see it all the time. You do achieve all that success. You exceed your dreams. You're one of those people. And you know what one of the top regrets of the dying is? I worked too much. So now you're 85 and you can't undo it. You can't go back. For some of us, really though, deep down, we have an idea of what we want our relationship dynamic, our family situation, or even our romantic experience to be like. We have a design for it. And if and when that does not pan out in our lives, again, it's not just a letdown. You feel like you've ruined your life. You feel like maybe you've missed the entire purpose you've had for your life. Guys, it could be so many different things. Financial security, comfort, kids, early retirement, pleasure, fame, recognition, health. We think we know what is going to make us happy. We think we know what is going to make for a meaningful, satisfying, fulfilling life. Because how hard could it be? Designing the life I want. Well, here's what a lot of people realize. They built a life out of highly flammable material. And when the fires come into your life, what happens is your hopes and dreams get burned down with it. Jesus said something jaw-dropping. This is the stuff only God could say. He's either crazy or he's God, because otherwise you don't say stuff like this. Jesus says, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. Now, when Jesus talks about life here, he's not just talking about your pulse, like being alive physically. He's talking about the all-encompassing entire existence you experience, your purpose, your motivations, your identity. It's everything. And Jesus is saying, if you try and define or design the purpose for your life, you are going to drive your life right off a cliff. Your life will not be able to stand up against the fires that are going to come. So Jesus says, no, actually what you need to do is you need to lose your life for me. You need to lay aside what you think you really want and trust me with your entire life. And Jesus says, paradoxically, that's the only way you actually get to experience the life you're meant to live. Now, how in the world does that work? That's hard to understand. Paul in the New Testament gives us a little bit more light into what I think this looks like. Look what Paul says, talking about Jesus. For in him all things were created. All things have been created through him and for him. Now, wow, what a sentence. Paul is saying Everything in the entire universe has God's fingerprint on it, which includes you. And you were not just made by God. Paul says you were actually made for him. And so in the same way a hammer was made to hit nails, a car was made to drive, Paul is saying you have a divinely inspired purpose and design for your life. God has plans for you. He has things that your life was meant to do. Now follow me here. If Jesus is really who he said he is, so he is God, the creator of all things, and he came into this world to die for your sin. And then he rose from the dead, conquering that and setting you free. And now the same Jesus is ruling and reigning over the universe and is going to come back and bring in his kingdom. I just have a question. What greater purpose is there than for you to live the life he wants you to live? What could possibly be a greater life than living for that God right there? And this is why Paul says, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Paul is saying, live the purpose you were made to live. Live this life that reflects God's goodness and his love and his creativity and his wonder. Live a life that points to the greatness of our God. That is the standard of life we're called to. I'm telling you guys right now, this is the biggest life you could possibly live. This is the most impactful life you could live, the most beautiful, meaningful, fulfilling, joy-filled. This is living in alignment with the God of the universe. That's the life you were made for. So whatever you do, Paul says, live it for God. Live with this appreciation and this awareness and this awe of who God is, and let your life reflect that glory and goodness. Now, if that is truly what we are called to, if that's the greatest life you can live, if you can glorify God in whatever you do, you know what that means? You can also glorify God in your fires. Famous story in the Bible. These three young men, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they're these friends of Daniel in the Old Testament. They get brought into exile into the nation of Babylon. Horrible situation, not something they asked for or wanted. And the king of Babylon at the time demands that these guys bow down to a statue that he set up. And these young guys are like, we're sorry, king, we actually can't do that because we only worship God. That's a line we draw. There's just one problem here. That is a death sentence. And so this king is like, well, okay, if that's your choice, I am going to go throw you in that furnace right over there, and I am literally going to watch you burn alive, and I'm going to enjoy it. So all I need you guys to do is bow and we can get past this thing. So these young guys are facing a literal fire. And so what are they going to do? They're staring death in the face. Look what these guys say to this king. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Look at this tension. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. These guys are about to get burned alive. And all they have to do is this. That's all they got to do. I mean, maybe they can cross their fingers behind their back or something. God will understand. Like, that's all this guy is asking to do. But here's the difference. These young men, they knew their purpose. And they knew that the ultimate purpose of their life was not self-preservation. It was not living their best life. It was not checking everything off on their bucket list. It wasn't to be successful. It wasn't to retire early. No, their purpose was God and his glory. And because these guys knew their purpose, these young men were prepared to glorify God through their deliverance or their death. Because they said, either way, God gets the glory. There's a book that I come back to periodically. I've never read it just all the way through once. It's too thick. This book is called Fox's Book of Martyrs. And this book is one of the most convicting books I think I've ever read in my entire life. You see, because the cultural moment we live in right now, we don't want to admit this, but we feel like we deserve a good life. We actually think God owes it to us. And we get mad at God when he doesn't give it to us. He's not doing his job. And there's a reason why this book just convicts me so much. I can only read it in small portions. Because how hard could it be to live for God? How hard could it be? Well, this entire book is about people who suffered horribly and died for following Jesus all throughout Christian history. And what is so convicting for me is so many of these people actually had opportunities to avoid the fires that were coming their way. They could have done that. But avoiding those fires would have required that they seek their own safety and security over God's glory. And these people would rather die than do that. And see, what you see through these people's lives all throughout history, but even what you see so clearly from the Bible, is yes, sometimes we glorify God through success. But sometimes we glorify God through suffering. For some of us in here, you're going to want the first one, but God's going to call you to the second one. And he's going to put you in a position where you have to decide whose glory you care about more and what you are willing to endure for it. You know, Jesus was facing his own fire at one point. He was facing the fire of his own death, dying for the sins of the world. That's a pretty hot fire. And Jesus, even at one point, asked God the Father to take it away. He said, hey, I would love to not have to do this. I trust you. But you know what Jesus even says as he's looking at his impending suffering and death? He says this, now my soul is troubled. What should I say? Father, save me from this hour of suffering? No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. And so you even see Jesus himself, he was not living for his own safety. He wasn't living for security. He wasn't trying to live his best life. He had a greater purpose. And he was willing to go to a cross for it. And so there's one other thing I got to speak to on this one, because I really think it's so important that we get this. Anytime you go through a hard season, a difficult situation, a fire, you are going to want to ask this question. It's almost natural. You know what you're going to ask? You're going to ask, why? Why, God? Why me? Why now? What did I do to deserve this? Do you not love me? Do you even care about my life? Has anybody ever thought this before in your life? Okay, these are called weekdays when you, But here's what's so strange about this dynamic, because you would think, yeah, it'd be great to know why. That would help me get through this. But God, strangely, if you look through the Bible and honestly look at your own experience, many times God is not interested at all in answering that question on this side of heaven for you. He doesn't, very rarely. But there is one question that if you ask it, you almost guaranteed always get a clear answer for when you're in a fire. And the question you should ask in fires is not why. You know what you should ask? How? How? J.I. Packer's a famous theologian. He says this, if you ask, why is this happening? No light may come. But if you ask, how am I to glorify God now? There will always be an answer. And so what Packer is showing us here is whatever season you're in, good or bad, hard or easy, clear skies or fires, he's saying you have an opportunity to glorify God no matter what. You have an opportunity to live your purpose. And so the one question you should always ask, whatever is going on in your life, is how? How can I live for God in this moment that maybe he's allowed me to step into? Because my ultimate goal for my life is not avoiding fires. The ultimate goal of my life is not my own security. It's not my own comfort. It's not living my best life. It's not even preserving my own life. My purpose is God. That is what my life is about. And even Paul in the New Testament, man, this is a strong line. Look what Paul was able to say for himself. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ whether I live or die. May you be able to say that for your own life. May that be our greatest ambition. May you really understand your purpose, because you're going to need it in the fires. Now, I've got one more here that we need to do. You want to face fires? I think this is the most important one. It'll also be the shortest. And you have to make sure, if you want to face fires, that you understand God's promise. Understand God's promise. Now, there's an interesting thing about fires. When a fire starts, it always wants to spread. It's looking for more fuel. It's looking for more things to burn up. And so you'll see fires. They just start to consume everything around them. So even think about, man, we hear about these all the time. Wildfires, right? Now, a wildfire, it can start from just one tiny little spark. But sometimes these things can explode across hundreds, even thousands of acres. And you'll sometimes hear this kind of term when they're talking about wildfires, this idea of containment. Right? So you're watching what percentage is it contained? And containment is this idea of how much of a perimeter do these firefighters have around the fire so that it can't spread more. So interestingly, even if a fire is 100% contained, it still might be burning. It just means it can't spread any further. But a fire that's 0% contained, that means it can just burn wherever it wants to go. There's no control over this thing. Now here's what you'll notice. Sometimes when you go through fires in your life, you're going to realize pretty quickly that you have a containment problem. So it starts feeling like that fire is spreading in your life. It's happening in this one area, but now it's impacting your relationships. It's impacting just your peace of mind. There are secondary fires that start happening around that fire because of it. And before you know it, it feels like your entire life is going scorched earth. It's like everything is just on fire. Like nothing seems like it's going right. And these are the fires where you're going to start asking yourself, am I going to make it through this one? Like this might be the fire that ends me. And even if I make it through this fire, I don't even know if it's going to matter, because on the other side, my entire life is just going to be a smoldering pile of ash anyways. There was a time in history when God's people went through an extreme fire. They were actually invaded by a foreign nation, Babylon. This was the same invasion that brought Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to Babylon. So those events are actually related. And this wasn't just any type of invasion. Babylon was known for historic levels of violence and brutality. And so they would break into Israel. They would burn entire towns to the ground. They would take people's children from them in front of them and kill their kids in some of the most horrific, vile ways you could possibly imagine, right in front of their parents. And then what they would do is they would take people, throw hooks in their mouths and their noses, and drag them hundreds of miles back to Babylon, where they would then live the rest of their lives, never to see their homes, families, or friends again. So this was hell on earth. And these people's entire lives went up into flames. And it's in the middle of this fire that God speaks to these very people. And this is what God says to them. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not consume you, for I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. Now, did you see what God said here? Key detail. God says, when you walk through the fire. It's not if, it's when. Okay, you will never be able to avoid fires in your life. They are going to come. But I thought this was even kind of interesting. God says, when you walk through the fires. See, when I think about fire in my life, I'm like, you know what would be nice? To run through the fire. God, can we just fly through the fire? What if we just do that? That would actually be kind of nice too, because how hard could it be if we get through the fire fast? But God's like, nope, one thing you need to accept, Sometimes you're going to walk through these things, and it's going to be a slow and hot and painful stroll through the blaze. So fire's inevitable. But did you see the promise? Did you see God's promise? You will not be burned. The flames will not consume you. Now, is God promising these people absolute protection from fires? Is he saying you are never going to suffer? It's never going to be hard. No, they're already suffering. They're literally in the middle of a fire. So it can't be that that's what God's saying. This is what God is saying to them, though. He's saying, no matter how uncontained the fire feels to you, it's never uncontained for me. No matter how bad the fire feels, no matter how much it feels like it spreads in your life, God says, I will make sure there is no fire that will ever destroy you. Because God says, I am the Lord your God, your Savior. And so here's the key line, everybody, you need to understand about your life. God does not cause every fire, but he does contain every fire. He doesn't cause everyone, but he absolutely promises to contain everyone. God has 100% control over every single fire you will ever face. And so this is God's promise to you. God says, I may not prevent every fire in your life, but I promise you this, I will be with you. God says, I will be with you. Whatever fire you face, God says you do not need to fret, you do not need to fear, you do not need to lose hope or faith, because the God of fire is with you. Now, church, as we close, I know even when I say that, our thoughts immediately want to go to, well, hold on, Brian. Fire definitely does consume, because I've seen it ruin people's lives. I've seen some of the stuff people have gone through. Brian, I've seen it devastate my life. How could you possibly say fire doesn't destroy? My life has never been the same because of some of the things I've had to go through. Well, see, you got to understand, God already proved the promise. We have a God who knows what it's like to go through fire. Because you see, Jesus, he came into this world and he faced so many fires throughout his life, but then a moment came when he had to face the one fire above them all. It was the fire of God's judgment for our sins. This is the one fire that Jesus had to confront. And even though we started the fire, church, Jesus, he didn't avoid it. He didn't run from it. He went right through that fire. And Jesus on the cross experienced the most horrific fire that has ever burned in the history of this world, where he experienced the full wrath of God for our sin. It was our fire. And even in that moment, it looked like the fire consumed Jesus. He died. He lost to the fire. The fire of death won. But guys, come on, you already know this. You cannot put out the fire of God. It burns too hot, it burns too bright, because you guys know how this ends. 3 days later, what happened? Our Jesus, he rose from the grave, everybody. He defeated that fire of death once and for all. He is alive. And so you got to see this, guys. Jesus, he overcame the ultimate fire. He won against the worst fire. So you know what this means? There is no fire you will ever face in your life that Jesus cannot handle. There's no fire that you will ever go through that he will not ultimately overcome. Even when you face the fire of your own mortality, even when you stare your own death in the face, that is just going to be the passing through of a small fire for you. Because you're going to step through that fire and step into new life, eternal life, the very kingdom that God has prepared and promised for you. So church, you need to know this. As long as God's fire is burning in you, there is no fire that can destroy you. The fire of God burns too bright. It burns too strong. You will not be consumed. And so, church, as we end this series today, if that is true, the best thing you can do is this: never be lacking in zeal. But keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Because, church, with God, you can know for certain you are going to make it through every single fire you ever face. So, church, we're going to close this series out with a song that just fits right with this message. This is actually a song referring back to that very experience Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had. It's a song about God being with you in whatever fires you face. And I'll tell you, church, this song has a special place in my heart because this was the very song that just became the exact thing I needed through the worst fire in my entire life years ago. So for some of us in here, this is an opportunity for you to declare the promises of God over your life, that he is with you and for you through the fire. So I want to invite us to stand, church, and we're going to sing this out to God today.